My guest today is writer, director, poet Phil C. Dunn, the owner of Authentic, a production company based in Brixton, South London. And with a varied background, having studied even medicine and then theology, Phil had no formal training in film. But after writing and directing a couple of short films, I came to know Phil with his third short film, The Stupid Boy, in 2022, which is still one of my top three favorite short films that I have ever had the experience to watch. Now, The Stupid Boy itself won more than 50 awards at over 70 festivals, qualified for consideration at the BAFTAs and the Oscars in 2024. Now, Phil is following up this success with Fire Lily, a very, very powerful poetry and dance narrative short. So it goes like this. Take one night as a pandemic, protests, and wildfires rage across the world. An encounter between a police officer and a dancer takes an unexpected turn. Now, as the tension escalates, reality shatters into a surreal epiphany of poetry, music, and dance. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker and friend Phil Dunn and his absolutely remarkable short film, Fire Lily, to the show. Welcome back,
Oh,
Phil. It's been a while.
thanks so much, Ward. Yeah, well, it's lovely to be back, and thank you for that great introduction, as ever.
Well, you are
You were
very,
so.
very welcome. And oh my goodness, you sent me the screener for your brand new short film, Fire Lily.
Mm,
And wow, what an out of the box experience it became. I mean, and Fire Lily isn't simply just a narrative, it's a mixture of poetry,
mm,
dance,
mm.
visual art, social commentary, all woven into one cinematic experience, but it never tells the audience what to think, yet it demands that we do think. So, where did this extraordinary concept begin, and when did you realize it had to be told through movement with a narration that pulls the audience into a realm of thought?
Well, it first came to me in the form of a poem. So during lockdown, at the end of the last lockdown, it was just, I think, yeah, we basically, it was the day after George Floyd's murder, and I'd seen about it online, and then I, suddenly sort of came to terms with what had happened in that moment, and it shocked me, and something about it really resonated very deeply through me, and I felt like there was something being said in that moment, because there we all were with masks on, struggling to breathe through them. Some people in hospitals dying from asphyxiation. At the same time, there was Amazon rain, like the rainforest was on fire in the Amazon. There were wildfires there, and people were saying the lungs of the planet are burning. And then in this one extraordinary moment, one man on top of another on the streets of in Minneapolis, abusing his power to crush the other man, whilst he shouts, "I can't breathe." And there was this sense of, like, on all these different levels, all at once, this fight for breath. And that one moment between those two men, that awful moment, seemed to sort of somehow encapsulate something that was being said from from one man through to every person through to the planet itself, seemed to be saying the same thing. This fight for breath and needing, like, a message seemed to be coming through that. So I wrote this poem. I write poetry, and so I and it just was one of those ones that just my hand couldn't quite keep up as I was scribbling it across these bits of scrap paper, and I just felt something. I needed to listen to what was coming through, and so I sat with that poem for a couple of years. But it was when The Stupid Boy was on its run that I began to wonder if it could be a film.
You know, that's weird. Just the thought just came into my mind because I always remember the ending of The Stupid Boy.
Mm,
I always remember it. And now when I look back and think about that ending, and then when I watch Fire Lily,
mm.
it's it's not exactly a sequel of sorts, but wouldn't you say that the message connects to one another?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, naturally, of course, it's going to, because I think it's me writing both of them, and so I'm looking for the same things in the world. But yeah, I was very aware as it came together. It's like, oh, here we are. There's this encounter between one man and another man, and they're very different. and they're from different backgrounds. And in this case with the fire lily, it's a black dancer walking home through the streets of America in Cleveland, where we ended up shooting it, and a police officer. And in The Stupid Boy, it was a neurodivergent teenager who encountered a white supremacist suicide bomber. It was always a tricky pitch, that one, but anyway, we pulled it off. And yeah, so there is that thing about one man versus one person versus another person, and something extraordinary happening between them. And I think that's the clear sort of parallel between the two. And I think this one, yeah, it was interesting sort of keeping that parallel in mind as I went through the whole process of making it, and then into the edit as well. And trying to, the whole way through with this one, I was trying to understand still that same feeling of trying to understand what was trying to come through with this extraordinary project. And yeah, that's, you asked earlier why to use movement, because it felt like it was something bigger than me, bigger than just words that needed to be communicated. And so having this dance element in there allowed us to communicate something beyond words. That, you know, when these guys, when Nehemiah Spencer, the incredible Juilliard trained dancer, is on screen and moving, his body is speaking volumes that no word could ever do. And there's something so powerful about that. And that was trying to get somewhere near the power of this message that I felt was coming through when I made it. So,
You know, before we get into the actual film,
mm,
when you were creating Fire Lily, and even before production, you were teasing all of us with the fire lily, the flower itself. And I
yes.
understand that it has a very strong significance to the film. So for the audience, what is the meaning of the fire lily, and why did you use it as a catalyst to fuel this story?
Yeah, the Filey is an incredible flower that naturally occurs in only one place in South Africa, right near Cape Town, and it's endemic to that area. It's an extraordinary flower that can lie dormant underground for up to 40 years, decades, and the only thing that triggers it to awaken and to germinate is wildfire. So when everything else has been destroyed, and something that we're becoming more and more familiar with are these wildfires, when everything is being destroyed by these fires, these flowers, that it's actually the smoke of the fire somehow. I don't know how it works. I don't know if they, how do they know that there's smoke from wildfire when they're somewhere underground? But when that's the trigger. And so when everything's been destroyed and it's all charred and a total destruction all around, that's when these flowers decide to rise from the ground. And they are the first to return after wildfire within the first few days. And so they are like these heralds of regeneration. They're saying, we're going to come back after all this destruction. We're going to come back after everything that's been destroyed. This is our time. And there's something about that as a symbol that just completely caught my imagination. And I think with that sense of, gosh, there's so much going on in the world. There's so much destruction. There's so much just terrible things happening. We need to look for those symbols of hope that say to us, maybe this is the time to rise. Maybe this is the time to come back and regenerate and bring new life. And so, yeah, that I fell in love with it as a symbol, and then found, began to weave it in as I did into the story of the film, and to use it because it feels like it's the right time for it. And the more wildfires I see in the world, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, it feels like this flower, it's a sort of nature's own phoenix, and it has something to tell us.
Yeah, the one of the things that caught my eye, which I really loved, was the fact that the fire lily emphasis in the film
Mm.
really brings a very beautiful contrast
Yeah.
to the color palette.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And that's what's amazing, is that naturally occurring, that's what it does. So when you see them, if you look them up, a lot of the photos online will be, there's ash and charred background, so like dark gray and light gray of ash. And then in stark contrast, you have these flowers that come up with a kind of coral pink and some crimson in there as well. So they really are in such stark contrast to the background. And it's like, it's just beautiful. You're like, if you could design a flower that would be a beautiful symbol in the middle of all sorts of fire destruction, that's the color you would make it, and there it is. So and yeah, visually as a cinematic storyteller, it's just like, wow, what a great thing to work with. And of course, we really capitalized on that in the film.
Well, it really created a perfect jumping off point for you.
Mm. Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think, helping to just use some of the symbolism of those, that even that color contrast, which you then see in the dance, helps to keep drawing that theme through, which we've set up the idea of the fire lily at the beginning, and you're left wondering, okay, what's that got to do with this black dancer rehearsing in a studio and then walking home? But then you know that this color pink, and you know it's to do with wildfire, and then you see this scene where there's this burnt out backdrop, and you see that pink color again, and you're like, it's just a way of just keeping it ticking away in there, and then we sort of deliver towards the end. So it's yeah, I love that. That's what I love about cinema. You can
Well,
work with
yeah. Well, the color
color.
alone in the film, it's the thread that holds it together. And like early in the film, I went because I've seen this film a few times now, and so I watched it twice all the way through without stopping it. I went back again, and I love the opening sequence. So early in the film, the soundscape immediately captures our attention. We hear breathing layered with the crackling of fire before we've even settled into the story. So, how important was sound in placing the audience inside of a world that's already noisy and chaotic?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it became, I worked really closely with Tom Bell, who is the sound designer and composer on the film, and he also composed for the Stupid Boy, and we've worked together for many years now. And this one, we literally met up every week, regularly to continue to just keep tracking alongside one another with our understanding of how to approach this. And yeah, the sound design it became such a key player in telling the story in that first half, because the way I ended up writing it is that it's basically, there's no dialogue for the first half of the film. So all you've got is this sound design, this soundscape around the characters. And it became more and more crucial that that was exactly right in order to tell the story and keep you in it. And trust me, when we did the edit and you didn't have the sound design, I was like, "Oh no, what have I got here?" But
Yeah,
then
then it just looks weird, doesn't it?
yeah, but then Tom would bring in his sound design ideas, and we talk about all the symbolism of everything, and this motif of breath throughout, which had to be there because it was like the fight for breath, and it's something that unites all of us. We all have to breathe, and so that and but it also sets the tone for this kind of meditative quality about the film, because as you say, we're getting to grips with some very big stuff here, and it needs to be in a space where you can, like, rather than it being like overwhelming, it needs to be a place where we can like breathe, we can be amongst it, we can be thinking about it, we can be absorbing it and letting it go deep. And hopefully that's what it does.
Yeah, because see, in the beginning of the film, if I remember correctly, I think I timed it out at 5 minutes 38 seconds before the first actual human voice came in, but it was more, I think, through the police radio. And then, but in the very beginning, you have words that appear on screen, but there's no voice. You're causing the audience to engage by reading, seeing this beautiful visual behind it that is blurred for a moment. But then when we get into the middle of the film, where we see this very strong dance sequence, then the narration comes up, and then the audience now has to lean in and listen to that narration. So, because you're a poet, you wrote all of those beautiful words, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's probably what ended up in the film. So the poem that I wrote was called "The Human Race," literally sort of the race to become human, and it's the poem is about probably about 75-80% of the poem that I wrote originally. So we cut some bits out and let the visual do the talking in some places, but yeah, those are all those words, and you know that I was aware again trying to work with that in a cinematic film. Like those, these are really, this is a dense poem, and there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of double meanings in all the words. So how do we get people to pay attention to them, appropriate level of attention, that they're going to not, first of all, not be analyzing the words too heavily, but also letting them wash through them, and the meaning of the words hitting home. And that's a really delicate balance. So music has to be right, the visual has to be right, the movement on the screen has to be right, the sound levels and the of the voices have to be right, the tone of the voices. You know, it's so important so that you're not getting caught too much in the words, but at the same time they're having their powerful effect, hopefully, on you. Um, so yeah, it was. That was a really challenging part. And there are many times where I'm like, why don't I just do a normal narrative film, But like I
No,
said, it
no, no,
has
because
to
this
be
is
made.
a film that is it's cinematic artistry that I don't get to see too often. I'm starting to kind of make the statement that many of the short films that I see every year, they're following the same pattern. They're following the same look. They're all going for the same thing. And I like the things that are different, but they make a statement, and Fire Lily does that. There is a scene in the convenience store in this film where the officer, I get he got some coffee and a couple of bars or whatever, and he goes up to the counter to pay for it, and then it's the look on the clerk's face. Actually, we don't see her face because she's got a mask on because of the pandemic, but it's the rolling of her eyes. I was looking at that short sequence, and it reminds me of, it's like taking two magnets that are polar opposites and they never connect. They're pushing
Yeah.
against one another. Then you take that, and then later on in the film, we see the connection. And and it's that scene that we'll talk about in a moment that is so powerful. But I also want to ask you about something that, as I was watching the film, there was a one particular sequence that caught my eye. It's the woman, as the woman walks home at night, there is this subtle red lens flare stretching across the frame. Whether
Mm,
intentional or happened by chance, it
mm.
almost feels like humanity crossing a line that separates perception from prejudice. So, was that
Ooh.
visual symbolism something you planned, or did it reveal itself in post production?
Oh, I love that you say that. That's beautiful. I that So that, what I can't say that was planned, but what I can say is that we chose our lenses very, very carefully, and so the flares that we're getting from those lenses, they're Atlas Mercury lenses. They were I really pushed the boat out to get those, because we saw them at an expo, and I was like, those are incredible. And it's the look that they had. I just like immediately felt it. And they have this lovely swirly background when something's in focus in the foreground. So they just capture your attention, like, it was beautiful. So yeah, those flares were very much intended, but for at that particular moment, in that particular way, to make that statement. I love that you got that. But that is it. That's what you want. You're going out there to capture magic, and to see what magic comes at you whilst you've got the thing rolling. And yeah, if there's a flare at the right moment that connects with something in the audience's mind, that's intended. Maybe not by me, but it's meant to be there. So I love that you see
Well,
that.
that's the magic of filmmaking, and to have it become red. It reminded me when
Mm,
I saw it, and I had to back it up so I could
yeah.
watch it again. And I'm thinking,
Yes.
huh? Because we always hear the term, crossing the red line, and I'm like,
Yes.
man, this is either just one of
Mm,
those things that happen,
oh,
or
yeah.
or you plan it. I
Yeah.
don't think you can really plan
No, I
a
don't think so.
flare.
But you know what's great is that one of the references for the film was the Thin Red Line, and so the fact that you're pulling that out is like, wow, how's that happened? But yeah, the Thin Red Line, that film completely, it had that same thing of being able to be meditative in the middle of a very destructive space. It was in a war, and there's this narration, sort of poetic narration in the midst of it. And so that was something that I kept going back to in the writing and in the edit as well, just to find that similar tone. Because man, it's such a beautiful film, and that the beauty and brutality,
It
amazing.
it is, and but you also within the film you work to break a stereotype. The dancer is simply walking home after rehearsal. He's listening to classical music, he's replaying the choreography in his mind, yet because we only see him through another person's perspective, assumptions immediately begin to form. The audience is forced to confront how quickly we write stories about people that we've never met. So, was your goal to make viewers question not just racial stereotypes, but the instinct to judge anyone before knowing their truth?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was it. It was what I really wanted to show through that. You have this woman walking home and she feels like someone's following her, so she's naturally afraid. That's a very important, like, strong experience. A lot of women all over the world, all women all over the world will have had that experience. And actually when we filmed it, I became really much more keenly aware. This is we would, this is a real thing for so many people. So it's really important. And then you've got, on the other hand, the black guy walking home and he's got his hood up and he's listening to music, he's jerking as he's thinking about the moves that he wants to make to it, and she takes that as intimidating, or is he something wrong with him, or is he, so what I wanted to do through that was kind of highlight the sort of systemic thing of, like, these wheels, the systemic wheels of, like, prejudice and the way we can judge people sort of click into motion before we've even actually consciously engaged. That they're already get click click. Well, that he must be following me because he's taking the same turns, and he's got his hood up, and is it because he's black that she's more nervous, and when she does get in touch with her boyfriend, which you don't see what she says, but what's communicated there, and then suddenly he feels that he's going to tell his friend on the force, and it's one thing leads to another, and these tiny little things which are all legitimate. Her fear is totally legitimate, but but because of the sort of cogs of the system around, how that then tick 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 tick, and before you know it, something terrible's happening. And I think that's part of what I wanted to do, is to help wake people up, wake us up, the audience up, to those subconscious, unconscious things that we are unwittingly part of. And that's the whole point, is to become conscious of them and to then stop being part of them,
Well,
and to do something different.
yeah, because see, this film brings forth a very, very strong life lesson that most people are never taught. It's like the saying, "We're not born racist; you're raised as one." And this film helps to change that mindset. And because one of the boldest creative decisions is that your characters rarely speak. I mean,
Yeah.
instead, the narration carries the complete emotional weight, while the dance becomes the language of the body, the mind, and the soul. So when you wrote this script, because I'm so amazed, because I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what did Phil see on a piece of blank paper to write a script that makes it look like we're watching three films in one? So why was that silence between the characters more powerful than just using actual dialogue? I mean,
Yeah, it was that thing of, like, setting up, so when the poetry comes in, you are ready to hear something, some words, and then because they're like heavier, more complex and weightier words, but you're more likely to listen to them at that point. But yeah, the silence as well is about, again, creating that meditative space. And I think I did do versions of the script. Again, I wrote this script. I ended up on like 25 to 30 versions by the time I got done drafts of it. And it was much, much longer, and all of the usual, getting it down. And to only what was 100% essential in order for the story and for the feeling, the power of the story to come across. And yeah, that was at one point where I thought, let's try not having. In fact, it was someone who suggested it. They read it and they were like, it was already quite sparse, and they were like, how about just not having any words at all? And I thought, I did that once before in a film of mine called Box Office Smash, my first sort of narrative short that I put out on the festival circuit. And I did love how then you move into, because then you can watch that anywhere in the world. You're not excluding anyone at that point, because it's whether you're watching in Japan or Italy or America or England or Denmark, you can follow along. You don't have to work any harder than anybody else in the audience. And there's something about that that's very true to the core of the film, which is, this message of oneness, that we are all in this together, the human race, and we need to start to work together to do something about some of these problems. So yeah.
Yeah, like throughout the film, smoke continually drifts through the imagery. And I couldn't help but see it as more than the aftermath of the wildfire. It almost becomes a metaphor for misinformation, fear, false narratives that, well, cloud our ability to recognize one another's humanity. So did I read that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you did, but I think you've read it even better than I could have hoped. So thank you. um, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's it. That's again working with this idea of fire and smoke and everything was again with the sound design. We talked about that with Tom. Uh, this idea of fire being so many things all at once. Fire, historically, primevally, has been the thing that is when we discovered it as humans, it gave us warmth and safety, but it's also incredibly dangerous and destroys things. And so there's this like double-sided nature to it. And so yeah, working with the smoke also has that as well. It can warn us that there's a fire, and but it's not the fire itself. But it can also asphyxiate people, and they can't breathe. And it's and it is part of fire, which is destructive. So it has these natures. But yeah, I love, of course, the idea of like, we have the breath you can see in the scene on the street, and then you've also got the steam coming out of the manhole cover and stuff like that. It's like, how clearly are we seeing things? Is everything 100% clear? That's right there in the first scene, which is out of focus. The first, I don't know how many seconds it is of Nehemiah dancing at the beginning is completely out of focus. It's saying like, do we see? And that's of course how we start the poem, is do we see the need for a change? So yeah.
Well, even fire does a dance of its own.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But one of the film's most unexpected moments is when you reverse one of the most emotionally charged phrases in recent history and place
Mm.
"I can't breathe" in the experience of the police officer. I mean, what
Yes.
conversations were you hoping to open up by turning that expectation upside down?
Yeah, that was a big part of the consideration in what I was trying to approach through the poetry in the film. And um, really, it's about getting this idea of prejudice and racism and othering, and saying they're the problem over there. They are the problem. If we can say they're the problem, then it's not us, it's them. And we think by doing that, if we can just get rid of them, then we'll be better off and we'll be freer, and it's all their fault. But actually, the sad truth about that is that doesn't free you, that way of looking at things. In fact, it binds you up more than the person that you're pointing at, and you are more imprisoned by your own prejudice than the person that you try to imprison with your prejudice. And so that was really important. That sense of he can't breathe because of the fact of how he has become such an instrument of the systemic racism around him in that moment. It's so important that he can't breathe. It's actually affecting his breathing rather than yeah, the other way around. And so yeah, that was a really important point to be making, that actually it's, and it says it in the poem. I can't quite remember the line later, but it essentially it says that as well, that our prejudice is our prison, is what it says.
Yeah,
Um, so
I noticed two lines. Complicity is hereditary, and
yeah.
our prejudice is our prison. And they really stand out in this
Well,
film because then it's at that point that
mm,
the audience is now, to me, it's the point where the audience is truly captured.
oh, great. Yeah, I'm so pleased. I mean, again, that's come from, after that moment where I wrote that poem, having seen George Floyd, I was then I was having, and I still do, meetings every week with a great friend of mine, one of my best friends, Will James, who is a black man who's grown up in England in largely white environments. And his experience of seeing that, it rocked him to his core and brought to the surface so many experiences he's had throughout his life as a black man in those spaces, all the microaggressions and everything. And it felt like in that moment he saw them played out on a screen on his phone in front of him between two people. And it was like this, it sort of and it shook him and it shook me, because my experience of abuse as a child, so is something that I've worked through and grown and done a lot of work on. But I saw as well an enactment of that power abuse in that moment. Someone who should have been protecting the other man, but actually was using his power to destroy that other man. And so, yeah, I think it's all of those things that were sort of in the mix. I slightly lost track of your question, but I
No,
hope
no, no,
that
because no, because no, because I was talking about the two lines, the two very powerful
yes,
lines in the film,
yes,
but visually, because I'm watching Fire Lily,
mm,
and Phil, I'm in absolute awe of how you put this whole thing together, because
oh, thank
the film moves effortlessly between three distinct worlds. You have the grounded reality of city streets, you have the intimate rehearsal space with the dancer, there's the fire scarred landscape where muted colors suddenly give way to the vibrant color of the fire lily itself.
you.
How did you explain to your cinematographer what you visually wanted? And were there films in which you gained inspiration from besides the Red Thin Line?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a long process, and what was difficult about that was that we ultimately couldn't go. So I had Mario Genovese, the cinematographer from The Stupid Boy, was lined up, and we did a lot of the prep work on this film, and he was supposed to be coming over, but sadly, we he couldn't come over in the end. I won't go into how, but it was really difficult, and so last minute we had to find a new DOP. And what was amazing is that we found Rashad Polk, who's an incredible DOP from Cleveland itself, and he happened to have exactly the same camera, and he happened to be available only 2 weeks later, and um, he just stepped up to the plate, and it was absolutely incredible because I've never worked with him before. So I had to catch him up on a lot of stuff, and I use in my prep work. I use an online sort of organization software website called Trello, which allows you, a bit like Pinterest, to have lots of stuff all on a page, and it's a kind of like a mood board and reference, and you can link through to other stuff. So I had all the films on there that I was referring to and wanted to get the look from. Um, and one of the ones that I really it was actually a TV series, was the Underground Railroad, and that's on Prime. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is a really visceral and powerful piece of work about slavery and about that time in American history, and the Underground Railroad of black people trying to get away from slavery, and but it's shot so beautifully, and the extraordinary thing about it was that I started watching it a couple of years ago, but you know how sometimes you get halfway through a series and it was so intense that I literally just took it one bit at a time, because it's incredibly powerful but really difficult to watch. And so, and then I got obviously distracted and didn't go back to it. And I'd left it at like, I think episode 4 or 5. And I think it was so extraordinary because just before I went out, in the last month before shooting, I came back to it and thought, I better just carry on watching because I'd sort of been referring to it quite a bit. And I pressed play, and the scene that I watched then was extraordinary because it was this aftermath of a fire, actually in a kind of near a woods in this scene, and a man lying down in the middle of it, and on face down. And sadly, in that episode, he's not alive, but he was wearing sort of loose pants and he's lying on the ground. And I was like, that is extraordinary because that image. I hadn't seen that image because I hadn't watched it yet, but that had been in my head somehow, and that had been what I was trying to explain. So suddenly I could take a screenshot and sorry to the filmmakers, but and show it to the cinematographer and say, this is actually what we're aiming for. This stark contrast of the burnt out background and this person in the middle with this. And he was even wearing, the pants were kind of an orangey color, near to our kind of coral pink, which is kind of orangey pink. So it was stuff like that. It's extraordinary, and always on the lookout for, I'm so visual in the way that I imagine films and the way that I write them. So that's very much part of the script writing process as well, is I'm already seeing it as I write it.
Yeah, I remember the scene in Fire Lily because
Mm.
it is striking because it's an overhead shot.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I kept thinking about was, as a director, how did you explain to the performers and the choreographer what you wanted, and
Mm.
were they able to hear the narration that was going to go along with their performances?
Yes, they did. Yeah. So Tom had already composed the music for the film before we went into production, which was amazing, and again was a massive help in leading and helping me formulate the film, how it was going to be. So having that was crucial, and then I did a guide voiceover of the poem so that the dancers could then have something to work with and build on. So Nehemiah built what he wanted to do, and then we worked with Japo, who are a dance collective in Cleveland, and they work particularly in diasporic dance, kind of African cultural dance, and so Talise, who runs that, she's absolutely amazing, and she then worked with the group to choreograph around Nehemiah. And what was lovely is that I'd been put in touch with her separately, but it turned out she used to teach him when he was younger. It's stuff like that we kept having throughout the whole film. And I mean, that's a whole side of it. I'd love to tell you some more because there's been
Well, yeah,
incredible.
yeah. Tell me about the casting process because you needed an
Mm,
actor,
mm,
dancer, which
yes.
carries the complete weight of the film.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the first pieces of the puzzle that I got, which was incredible because this was really what made me turn it into a film. I had that poem; it was sitting in the wings. It was something that just came out of me. I was like, well, I don't know what to do with that. And then Stupid Boy, and it went over to Newport Beach Film Festival. And whilst I was there, I went to watch another film called The Shadow Between Us, and there was Nehemiah Spencer in The Shadow Between Us, a documentary trying to come to terms with George Floyd's murder and trying to, as a black dancer, use his skills to kind of explore that and going on a journey with it. And so I watched that at the festival, and then but every time Nehemiah came on screen and danced, I just found I had tears just rolling down my cheeks. There was something about him and what he was communicating through his dance that I just found overwhelmingly moving. And I didn't understand it, but I felt it. And I was like, that is so powerful. And I had such a strong sense, I've got to work with this guy. And I don't know how that would. So I walked up afterwards to the producer of that film, which was Obadiah Baker, who actually ended up becoming one of our exec producers on this film. And I said to him, hey, great work. And is there I just feel like I need to work with this guy, Nehemiah Spencer. How do I get in touch with him? He said, hey, well, here's his number. Why don't you talk to him? I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. And at that time, still didn't have Fire Lily as a film at all. I just had this poem and I didn't even put it together. But it was going away from that that I began to go, what could I do with dance? And I was like, something. And then obviously the content of what he was trying to work with in that film made me think of the poem. And I was like, maybe a dance, poetry, narrative film. That's where it began to formulate from there. And the only thing was, I was like, well, it's a shame because this guy lives in Cleveland, Nehemiah Spencer. I've never been to Cleveland. I doubt I ever will. And then the stupid boy gets selected for Cleveland International Film Festival, which is an Oscar qualifying festival. So I had to go. So a few weeks later, there I am having coffee with Nehemiah Spencer and telling him this idea.
Wow. Because I was kind of wondering with the locations
Mm,
that you used to shoot in,
yeah,
overall, why did you choose to shoot in America instead of just keeping it in the UK?
I know, right? It would have been
Well, yeah,
so
because
much.
most filmmakers that I've talked to from the UK, they're like, "Oh, the dream is to film in America. We just can't afford it."
Yeah, yeah, I get it. And I think again, I was very much, like that moment of serendipity. That's what I found with this film. I was following the trail of breadcrumbs the whole way through, and so when I got to go to Cleveland, I was like, wow, I get to here. I'm meeting this guy, and so really, maybe I am meant to work with him, and he seems really enthusiastic about the idea. But then also at Cleveland Film Festival, after one of the screenings, I went out. Obviously, go out to have a drink afterwards, and in the bar there, I meet Joyce Allen and Stacey Malone, and Stacey Malone is the president of Women in Film and Television Ohio, and Joyce is the program lead there as well. And I got talking to them and just said, "Hey, I just met this dancer. It's been so incredible because I didn't, I saw him a thing, and now I've just met him, and I've got this idea." And and they were like, "Hey, that sounds incredible! What a story!" You know what? If you make that, if you wanted to do it over here, you should do it in Cleveland. And if you do, we would love to help you as women in film and television. And I was like, really? Like, seriously? And they were like, yeah, we would. And I was like, do you know what? I might take you at your word on that one. And we stayed in touch. And yeah, then and we ended up filming it there. And I guess I just thought, well, if there's an open door, let's see if we can go through it. And it really was. And women in film and television were absolutely incredible. Joyce Allen ended up being our producer in Cleveland, and she did an amazing job pulling together an incredible crew. And we ended up, one of the things I pushed for was to have a powerful story behind the lens as well as the one we're telling in front of it. And yeah, we ended up with 72% female cast and crew, 78% people of color on the cast and crew. So stuff like that, it was so exciting, following these breadcrumbs and then finding such exciting elements that just only lend and add to the richness of the film, both in front of on the screen and behind it.
One of the things I think that this film needs to win an award for is the editing. I mean,
Oh,
that must have been hair
yes.
pulling.
It was. It was. I was very lucky to work with Rebecca Jagger. She's absolutely brilliant. Beck Jagger. She was amazing, and it was such a relief after the shoot coming back, going, "Gosh, as every director does, I hope we got it. I hope we got it. I don't know, will it work?" And handing it all over to her, and she just took it away, and the next time I saw it, it was basically a rough cut. Um, and that was really, really helpful. And then the second half of the edit, once it got down to the really minute detail stuff that was the hair pulling stuff, that's where I then took on the edit from there because we only had a certain amount of budget for Beck's time. And so I then took it on. And I've been editing for a long time. So, but yeah, this one, I have to say, the edit did nearly break me. And she was a great support with that. She would like just text every other day going, "Phil, are you all right? How are you doing?" I'd be like, just about like just holding on by a thread, because it was, yeah, it was, yeah. I was dealing with more different language, on screen than I ever have before. Even though I've edited for 20 years, I was working with dance and poetry and music and drama all at the same time, and trying to somehow get them to meld together in a way that felt one piece. And that was, yeah, it was really hard.
Well, to me, you accomplished it because I was so amazed when I watched it. I'm like, oh, what was the editing like?
Yeah,
Because again, it's like watching three films in one. There has to be this common thread that runs through all of them to tie it together. And it's funny because this year I'm seeing short films where there's an actual three-part arc. You get it. You see the beginning, you see the middle, you see the end. Yours is far more than three. Yeah, there's three different types of elements that we see, but the arc weaves in a much different way, and it actually seems much longer than the 17 minutes.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Well, it's actually, yeah, it's 15 minutes. So yeah,
Oh, 15?
yeah, it's super. Again, it was the same with the Stupid Boy. It's super compressed what we're trying to do, what I was trying to do there, and it's yeah, it was a finding it in the edit was another big part. It wasn't like I gave Beck a storyboard that I'd carefully drawn and had it, so she could follow that, which is why she could go away and just come back with a rough cut. But then from there, there was a whole nother journey, and there were I had to discover new versions of the film in the edit, and so it one of the key parts of the puzzle was realizing, oh, this film has to be kind of a meditation. And so that's where, and then it needs to be a meditation on these things. And so that's when we really then pushed more into the sound design with Tom, even more with the thoughts we've been having and relying on that more to tell the story. And then the other key part of the edit was also with the final scene and how that played out, because I just couldn't quite get what I'd been looking for in the script and in the storyboard. It just wasn't quite there. And it's because it needed to end differently. The emphasis I'd had was on the police officer changing. And actually towards I found in the edit that it actually had to go somewhere else, the emphasis. And that's where this song came in for the final scene. And we have this choir song that we ended up recording with our exec producer Alicia Dixon, which completely lifted that and changed the tone of the final team into something which I needed to hear just in the edit, just making it said something to me that I needed to hear as a creative person. And but hopefully is also what brings a sort of a different gravitas to the end of the film that wasn't there in the script.
Okay, the very, very ending of the film.
Yeah.
Was there a message in the U-turn?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. So you see, yeah, very good. Thank you. Yes, Ward will pick this up. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was saying when I was writing it. Exactly. In storyboarding, earlier you have him in the police car at an intersection, and he just goes straight ahead and doesn't. There's a sign there that says you could go right here, but he's like straight on and puts on the lights and off he goes to the rescue. And in the final scene, yeah, there's a U-turn, and so yeah, it's showing that something he's changed direction. He's not.
It was so subtle that most people may never pick up the meaning of that, just that simple little U-turn.
Oh,
And
thank you.
and so, but because I get to study these films at longer, because if you're sitting in the theater, you can't tell them, hey, could you replay that scene, please? And
Yes.
so you got to capture as much as you can. But I know that you had um, you created some screenings that were sold out. Tell me
Mm.
about those, and what were the reactions or any questions you got from the audience?
Oh, that's great. So far, we've only had one screening in London, which is a private screening, and then we've actually got one tonight in Cleveland with the cast and crew and some key people from Cleveland, which is really exciting. So Joyce is managing that and has done a great job bringing everyone together, and I'm so pleased. Like Al, we've even managed to get Al over from Los Angeles, Al LaFleur, who plays the police officer, so brilliantly. He's managed to come over back to where he was born and bred, to Ohio, to Cleveland, and and watch it with the cast and crew on the big screen where it's meant to be, which is great. But yeah, the one we did in London was extraordinary. And I was just so proud of how it came through, because we were working with our amazing exec producer Alicia Dixon, who is, she was on America's Got Talent as a judge. She's a global recording artist, and she's on Britain's Got Talent every year as a judge here. She is just a force for good in the world, and she got on board and got behind this film. And what was amazing at this screening was that we were able to put together a choir to sing the song that's in the final scene, which basically I wrote and she helped turn into something more beautiful. And we had a choir which was made up of the Brixton House Community Choir. So lots of people from around where my production company is based, and my new charity, Love Arts. And Love Arts, one of what we do with Love Arts is we give opportunities to young people in filmmaking and the arts. And so we got some kids from the Brixton Youth Theatre to be part of the choir, and they were singing there in the theatre with, global recording artist Alicia Dixon, who's got 2 million followers and all of that. This beautiful song that I'd come up with Alicia, and it was just that we, as people walked in, they were just humming the first bit of the song, and everyone was like, "What is going on? This is a screening," I thought. And then, once everyone sat down, then the song struck up properly, and it was spine tingling. And what was so lovely is it kind of set up. So that's what people said in the Q&A afterwards, was it just set up so perfectly the atmosphere to be able to then receive the film in all its fullness. And yeah, the discussions afterwards, it was not a Q&A, it was people needing to explore and express their thoughts after having seen something really rich and multi-layered and multi-dimensional. And some of the stuff that people said, again, I was just like, wow, you've articulated that better than I could ever have hoped. And you've what the film did is gave a symbolic cinematic world to explore some of these really difficult things from a different angle, and to come at them from a fresh place with a sense of hope and a sense of new energy about them. And yeah, the stuff that people were saying just blew me away. So that I'm looking forward to more of that, and trying to get those opportunities out there. And we're lining up some pretty exciting stuff right now, quite soon in the future. So yeah, I'm looking forward to letting that out there.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, is it a narrative film? Is it a documentary? Is it a social impact film? Well, I can tell you this: Fire Lily is an artistic masterpiece of all three wrapped together as one. Now, the South African fire lily is one of nature's most extraordinary miracles. Hidden beneath the earth, the flower lies dormant until wildfire sweeps across the landscape. Now, remarkably, scientists discovered it. It is not the flames or the heat that awaken it, but the smoke itself. A quiet catalyst that transforms devastation into breathtaking beauty. And that extraordinary phenomenon becomes the heartbeat of director Phil Dunn's Fire Lily. Now, set against one of the most turbulent chapters in modern history, a world consumed by a global pandemic, civil unrest, and raging wildfires. Fire Lily begins as a tense encounter between a police officer and a black dancer just walking home at night. Yet, what unfolds is far more than a confrontation. Blending gripping drama with breathtaking poetry, music, and dance, the film explores humanity, division, hope, and healing in ways that challenge audiences to confront their own assumptions. Now, through mesmerizing cinematography, evocative narration, and expressive choreography, Fire Lily becomes less a story about conflict than a meditation on our shared humanity. But what makes Fire Lily so unforgettable is that it refuses to choose sides or offer easy answers. Instead, it invites us to look beyond fear and rediscover empathy. Bold, timely, artistically fearless, the film becomes more than a cinematic achievement. It is a conversation starter, revealing the transformative power of compassion when the world seems most fractured. And Phil Dunn doesn't ask audiences to abandon conviction, he asks them to recognize the humanity in one another before judgment takes hold. So, like its botanical namesake, Fire Lily reminds us that renewal is often born from our darkest moments. Sometimes it is not the fire that changes us, but the smoke that clears our vision. And in an era too often defined by division, Phil Dunn has crafted a visually stunning and emotionally resonant short film that believes healing is still possible. And Fire Lily leaves audiences with a quiet but enduring truth. Even after the fiercest fires, humanity still possesses the remarkable capacity to bloom. And a film so powerful that it places the emphasis on the power to change, the power to heal, and that empathy should be stronger than judgment. And Phil, I want to thank you so much for giving me the honor to watch and discuss this remarkable artistic film. And much, much success to you and your team moving forward.
Thank you so much, Ward. I mean, gosh, I couldn't ask for a better summary at the end there. But yeah, it's as always such a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for watching so carefully and for really taking it in and really engaging with it. I mean, that's anything, everything any filmmaker could hope for. So I'm eternally grateful to you for that.
You're very, very welcome, Phil. And ladies and gentlemen, some of the best short films in the world are those that quietly give us a life lesson that we need to, well, open up our eyes, open up our ears, and open up our hearts. And, well, like the film kind of shows us, we make a U-turn to be better people. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, you can watch or listen to all of the Bondon Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel, and we're on Spotify, iTunes, and more. And remember, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.